So one of the beauties of being the conference organizers is you can give yourself an entire slot in the middle of the conference. That's the price you pay, for us being in charge. But our goal is to share information about the application of cognitive information processing theory here at Florida State. And has been noted earlier, we live and breathe, walk the walk, talk the talk in that building across the street. If you haven't had a chance to visit it, I encourage you to take a peek in there. Even though the formal tours are over, our students are around. If you want to see some aspect of the center and how we do service delivery, we'll talk about that today. We hope to address some of the myths about our theory. Some people put it in a category of, it's just a decision-making model, or it's just here at Florida State, or it really doesn't deal with change and chance and all of those things, but we hope to share how that's not the case. So we're going to do a little looking back at some of the origins of the theory, how the different roles that the team of us that have worked on this over the years, including many graduate students at the master's and the PhD level. So it's definitely been a group effort. We couldn't do what we do. And as Dr. Reardon talked about earlier, how do you keep a theory going? And there's a lot of people involved in keeping a theory going. So we're going to share it. We're going to highlight some of the research on the theory. It's been a worldwide phenomenon. And Dr. Peterson, and I want to give a shout out to Adam Miller, who worked very hard on categorizing all that information, talk about how we give this theory away. That Career Center across the way, if you look at the latest stats, Dr. Dozier's on the front row here, more than 19,000 people came through. We have to do what we do quickly and well, and our team over there does that. And when I was in charge of that area for 17 years, I said, if I can't understand it, and I can't explain it, and I can't train somebody to do it, we're not going to do it. So they've held to that standard over the years, and so that's some of what you're going to see today. So I'd like to start off by inviting Bob Reardon up to talk a little bit about the origins.
Well, I think I'm the oldest one, so naturally I would be talking about the origins. Peterson is from California, of course. Spent some of his training years at Duke. It's where he picked up some of his interest in basketball, I learned. He's clearly the prime architect, the originator of CIP. Came out of courses that he took in cognitive science here at FSU to update and maintain his license. Picked up the pyramid in that process. Then he was on a grant project looking at the generic outcomes of general education. And that's where the CASVE cycle came from. So there's a really strong learning piece that's a part of all of this. He got Sampson and I to sit down, and we would have a lunchtime sort of seminar. It would be a competition, sort of get up to the board, who had the eraser, who had the marker, and that went on for almost 2 years. It was like a really invigorating seminar. We each had ideas about all of this. Peterson is self-described as the kooky inventor, and we all agree to that. He wrote part one of the 1991 text, which was really the theory part of that. And Sampson came later. He spent some time at Miami after Wisconsin and Georgia Tech. He was the guy who was primarily responsible for putting the theoretical ideas into practical terms that clients could use themselves and directly. So he created client versions of the materials, which you'll still see on the shelves over in the Career Center. Because of his background and experience with computer applications, he was able to help us think more about what happens besides the information, what's going on in people's heads and the way in which they use information and data that's in computer-assisted guidance systems. The idea of the individual learning plan, 7-step service delivery scheme, I think those are primarily the result of Sampson's contributions. I was actually the first one here. I came 1963 to start graduate school. Probably never should have been allowed to stay here. Academic affairs would probably not allow that now. I was involved in helping to write some parts of Part 3. Sampson and Peterson also helped with that. I was reluctant to participate in all of this, but they convinced me that the self-help oriented service delivery scheme over there that was relying on Holland's theory heavily, that it was consistent with what they were thinking about with CIP. And so we all agreed about that and came up with a practice model. Instructional systems design, if you don't know much about that theory, was integral in all of this. And we started off in the Curricular Career Information Service with instructional modules, self-help oriented kinds of tools that didn't require a counselor to assist with service delivery. So self-help was a part of all of this from the very beginning. We did grow up to think about being career theorists, of course, but we thought we did have a kind of novel idea about how all this might work, and it turns out that I think we did.
For some strange reason, I see myself as a kooky inventor. I think I have more compulsive than the rest of us. One common thread, before I move on to the next slide, that all three of us share in common is that we were all counselors in a university counseling center. That we, at a time when we served, which is in the 60s, there were no career counselors or mental health counselors. We did it all. So that we bring to each other a common experience of dealing with human problems, the career issue being one problem, integrated with other problems in one's life. So we have natural broad perspectives. Don't have much time assigned to this, but I'll just gloss over this and hit the highlights of CIP theory. We have, a lot of books, book chapters, and articles out there for you to dig deeper into this. But CIP came on the shoulders of some real titans. And all of us together here, we trace our ancestry, of course, back to Frank Parsons. And Frank Parsons said, self-knowledge and occupational knowledge, when combined with true reasoning, yields appropriate choices. So true reasoning, well, we unravel a little bit what true reasoning consists of. And through the course of the decades, in the 70s and 80s, we had career decision theorists. Gillette, Janison Mann, Katz, Miller, Tiedemann. When you put these together, they kind of saw career decision making as a 5-step process. Define a problem, understand causes, formulate options, prioritize alternatives, and implement solution evaluate. That's a theme that, wow, that's familiar. That's ultimately part of our model. Then we brought together also information and theories from the cognitive revolution. General problem solving by Newell and Simon, hierarchical components by Sternberg, semantic and episodic memory by Tulving, and generic processing skills by Gary Woodish, and executive process by Mike Moore. I'm selective in that, but you get a sense. We married career decision making with cognitive theory. That was just part of the environment and the zeitgeist of the 70s and 80s. And if you look upon that as, say, pieces of a puzzle, we assemble these pieces and voila, we got the pyramid. And the pyramid is a parsimonious representation of cognitive structure. We have at the base self-knowledge and occupational knowledge, which are the knowledge domains. We have the decision-making skills in the center that we alluded to earlier, and executive processing at the top. This is analogous to a computer programming, where you have data files at the bottom, program files in the middle, and JCL or job control language at the top. And that's from Newell and Simon's article, The Mind as a Computer. So again, we draw traditions and concepts and analogies. Now within the decision-making skills domain, we have the CASVE cycle that we affectionately refer to it. And it's communication, analysis, synthesis, valuing, execution. See it? And what you see presented before you is the client version. And this is a handout that we give to our clients to say, this is how we view the process of career decision-making. And this is to serve as a guide, not a straitjacket. It's one of the early criticisms was that we confined and constrained the career decision-making to a group. Well, it's not that so. For example, we can go around and we loop back. If you've done a lot of this work, you'll notice that if we start off, we identify and get in touch with a problem. That's this, the Gestalt, getting in touch. We understand the causes. Then we formulate options. And we get to prioritizing, and we get down to, we got 3 to 5 choices. And we hear, yes, but. And you're like, oh, gee. That's their first clue, is that we have gone too far and too fast, and we got to draw back through the communication phase. Some definitions, parts of theory. Definitions are also part of any theory. We have several that are key. The career problem is defined as a gap between the existing state and the desired state of decidedness. This comes from cognitive dissonance theory, and that the dissonance between Festinger's theory of cognitive dissonance is that the gap provides energy and motivation to close the gap. So this is the energy and the source of energy that encourages and fosters career problem-solving decision-making. Then career decision-making is removing the gap and committing to a plan. This is a career decision state. This is something we're working on now. This is new. We keep pushing the theory. This is a conscious awareness of self regarding one's career goals and aspirations at the moment of entry into career counseling. The career decision state. As talked about later, it's composed of the certainty toward a goal, the satisfaction of a goal, and the clarity of one's goal. Then we have a career decision space, or all the contextual elements associated with a career problem. This is kind of reminiscent of the speaker earlier on systems. And finally, readiness for career decision making is the capability to manage the complexity of a career problem. And Jim will expand on that. Our assumptions, 3 major assumptions. The career decision making involves both cognitive and affective components and processes. Every phase has how are you thinking and feeling about that issue. There's always thinking and feeling. Decision-making entails effortful and deliberate thought. This is from Kahneman's 2 systems of thought. One is deliberate, the other is shallow and spontaneous and shallow. We see our paradigm as requiring deliberate, patient, and thoughtful processes. Finally, all individuals are capable of making informed and careful decision-making. And the role of the advisor or the career counselor is to provide guidance and resources to enable that to occur. We have one major proposition. That's an overarching aim, is that through the individual presenting a career problem, we use it as an instant and an opportunity to learn about career problem solving and decision making. When we work through the cycle, we get back to the communication phase, and that's where an opportunity to reflect on the process and to be able to transfer what we're thinking to other life problems, other career problems or life problems. Finally, operations. These are replicable procedures, techniques, artifacts that grow out of a career theory. These are the tangible parts of theory. One is the CASVE cycle, which is a cognitive strategy in cognitive language. We've developed a number of assessments to evaluate and assess a client condition. These will be described. A workbook to reframe negative thoughts so that we can view the problem-solving process more positively. We have a systematic career practitioner training. We also have a unique CIP learning environment. Please go to the Career Center and see CIP Center in action before you leave. It's a different way of looking at this process. And finally, we have a differentiated service delivery which says, let's match resources to the nature of the problem.
All right, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm going to be talking about the use of assessments that Gary just described. We have all kinds of assessments that help support our theory and that we use to help our clients tell the story, help us understand the story of their issues involved in career decision making. Looking at readiness, also some self-assessments, assessing option knowledge. Actually, that's kind of hot off the presses too. Jim and I are conducting some research this summer looking at 2 instruments focusing on information that we didn't even get here, hot off the presses. Decision-making state as well. So. Readiness assessment, we used the Career Thoughts Inventory, which was an inventory developed by the theorist in conjunction with Denise Saunders as well, and our practitioners, Dr. Janet Lenz and Denise Saunders, to look at that top piece of the pyramid. What is the negative or dysfunctional thinking that's going on that prohibits people from making effective career decisions? Let's go ahead and take a look at that. Self-administered, objectively scored, 48 items. It's usually a pretty quick fix unless some of the items slow a person down. I get so overwhelmed I can't make a choice. That could cause some reflection, some emotional discomfort that might slow someone down. But the idea is that you're identifying an individual negative thoughts that are getting in the way of making a career choice. So as a counselor or a psychologist using that tool, then I can go back and look at all of those 48 items, not usually at one time, but at least looking at the most elevated ones and saying, okay, it seems like this one may be getting in the way. Tell me more about that. You can also then look at constructs within the CIP model. Decision-making confusion, which is I just get so overwhelmed I can't get started. Commitment anxiety. Here in Florida we have a lot of pools, especially in Tallahassee because it's hot and our access to the beach is about an hour and a half away. So if you think of going to the edge of the diving board and looking over and saying, okay, I think I'm ready to jump, but maybe not, right? That's kind of commitment anxiety. So I've got to the point of making a decision, but something's pushing me back. So being able to step back and say, what might that be? External conflict, we just heard a few minutes ago about systems theory. This definitely plays into this idea of other people that are important in my life getting in the way, or my perceiving that they're getting in the way of a career decision. So we can look at the item level, or we can look at the major construct level and decide where we need to intervene. Overall, it looks at what's the level of negative thinking and barriers. We also in Florida have love bugs, and it only takes one big one to block your view of where you're headed. So if you imagine 48 love bugs all over the front of your windshield, before you can make it to your destination safely, you got to get rid of those. So that's part of what the CTI is about. It measures dysfunctional career thinking, and through the research, we didn't cite it all here, but we've got repeated indicators within our CIP bibliography of what is related to dysfunctional career thinking. And we see these come up time and time again. So you're working with someone with elevated career thoughts or negative career thoughts. You're also kind of checking off and looking for red flags on depression, impulsivity, anxiety, and the like. Decision space worksheet. So that was our specific standardized tool that we've used. We've also got some non-standardized tools. We've got something for everybody, which is kind of nice. You've seen the circle before, maybe in the previous presentation, but this is how we use our circle. Decision space, so they start off and they start on the left. What are all the items or thoughts, feelings that you're thinking about with respect to this career decision. And we leave it vague, so it can be, do I go to graduate school? Which job do I choose? Which major do I choose? I think I need to change. Do I follow my partner or not? And so forth. We just added the valances on not too long ago. Is that a negative or a positive, or is it neutral? I know for me as a practitioner, I'd look and I'd say, oh gosh, well, finances or parents, I immediately think negative. I don't know why, but I do. But then found out in talking with clients, no, that wasn't a negative. I actually have financial support to help me through. So we've added that in. And then they come over here and they draw it in a way that makes sense to them. So that connectivity or the lack of connectivity. Let's see, did I miss one with our picture? Oh no, this is the purpose. So it's a cognitive mapping task used to reveal thoughts, feelings, emotions, processes, and so forth, circumstances, and it's nice because they're projecting onto it. And then you'll see in a minute when we look at some examples of that, it helps to prioritize. You can see right away when they take one, within that circle, one smaller circle that's taking up the majority of that map, well, it's pretty clear what's getting in the way there. We've used it with middle school students all the way through adults. One of the things our center does is also serve community members too, and that can become more complex even. And then these are some of the areas that it reveals in terms of issues: distortions, family, finances, and so forth. Here's some sample ones. The one on the far left is the typical type of decision space worksheet that we'd see, little circles and different areas. You can kind of look at the amount of white space if you want to be really artistic and creative with that, or is it completely crowded like this one on the right? Anybody guess what Holland type this one is? Okay, yeah, artistic, yeah. It actually was an art therapy student that created that one. And we've had them use it as pie, we've had them use it as bullseyes, we've had them go outside of the circle, oh my, what do we do there? We process it like you would anything else. So. A new one that Gary mentioned, career decision state survey. We're always in the process of updating, honing our theory, and looking at ways to make it practical, useful. Right now we're using this as a research instrument, measuring certainty, satisfaction, and clarity. So there's samples of these available that you can look at, the DSW as well as some of our other instruments that can be used. So it's got the OAQ in it, a few MVS, my vocational situation items, and satisfaction items there. Self-directed search, we use that as well. That's you heard the link between Holland's theory and CIP theory, looking and using that in our research with our graduate students as well as for our own research, but helping us to identify options that match interest and personality, but also spending a lot of time looking at the secondary constructs and finding where it's correlated in terms of the NEO structure, looking at profile elevation as well. And then finally, I think that was my last one, but finally I mentioned we don't want to leave any part of the pyramid untouched, so Jim and I are working on one this summer off of a grant looking at career information literacy to get that information one and perceived value of career information. So lots of different tools we are involved with.
So Gary mentioned that the thing that knit Bob and Gary and I together were we were all counseling center staff members, is how we started our career. And that has shaped, I think, our thinking in a lot of ways. There was one of the moments that really transformed me was the second time I met Bob Reardon. The first time when we did some consulting together, but the second time was when I came for my job interview here at FSU, and he showed me what was then CCIS and a totally different model of service delivery. Because the kind of service delivery I was used to was a counseling center. We had a waiting room, we had individual counselors' offices, there was a secretary, there was a room in the back for doing assessments, and we included some information. That's a very simple model. There was the clients over here and had the counselors over here, and the flexible part in the middle was the waiting list. And so the waiting list would go from 2 weeks to 6 weeks, depending on the time of year, how long it would take before you got in to see a counselor. And unless you were actively suicidal, then you could see the person that was on duty. And that's a pretty standard model of the way counseling centers work. And I came here and Bob said, well, no, we have a little different approach to this. We assess everybody's needs at the front end, and then we deliver the services according to those needs, and that may not be an individual appointment. well, to a person that was a counseling center staff member, you have just violated the individual appointment, you know. God, how could that be? But he said, no, think about it. What if we put the client first? What if we're truly client-centered and we take a look at what does the client need at that moment? And perhaps what the client needs is just information. Or maybe what they really need is a little exploration to see what they might need. Why do they need an appointment to do that? So he really challenged my thinking. And so when I got a chance to come to FSU, we began working together as Bob described the group. And one of the areas that I got really fascinated by early on was this readiness for decision making. So when you think about 19,000 students, so we've got, at my count, 6 professional staff in career advising and counseling, a support staff member, and 18 students. So let's do the math. How close can we get to seeing 19,000 students? Not very well. We're going to miss a lot of people. So there has to be another method. So if we're going to provide differentiated services, which means different amounts of service to people depending on their need, the first thing we need to do is to understand what their readiness is. So how do we know who gets an individual appointment? How do we know who gets a brief intervention? And how do we know who could benefit from self-help? And so that's where this idea of readiness for decision making comes from, which is the likelihood of delivering an effective career intervention increases when the readiness of the individual is congruent with the type and amount of assistance provided. And it reflects an individual's preparation for engaging in the learning processes to explore and decide among options. And the things that influence readiness for learning also influence readiness for decision making. So that helps us with this. So we define readiness as the capability of an individual to make informed and careful career choices, taking into account the complexity of family, social, economic, and organizational factors that influence career development. And readiness also includes the kind of processing that language and literacy allows us to do as we go through this process of decision making. So this is the actual model itself. So it's a two-dimensional model where we've got capability here on the horizontal and complexity on the vertical. And so the way that it works is that if you have very high capability of making a decision, and of course Donald Super talked a lot about that in his original concept of career maturity. What were those factors? We've organized ours towards the pyramid and the CASVE cycle. But if a person has a high level of capability and very low complexity, if there aren't very many family or social or economic or organizational barriers that they're facing, then they can really benefit from self-help. Where if a person on the opposite end has very low capability for making decisions and is in a very complex life circumstance, they're going to require a great deal of assistance, and they're going to need individual case managed services or our individual counseling that we provide. But most of our services are provided in this self-help and brief staff-assisted mode. If you have some combination of complexity and capability, you'll end up in that brief staff-assisted area there. So the idea is we reserve our most powerful intervention, the individual counseling, for those people that really need that level of assistance. So the three areas then were self-help, brief staff-assisted, and individual case-managed services. For us, the self-help services are on the web, as well as coming into our career library. The brief staff-assisted services, which includes a walk-in service that you saw this morning for individuals with moderate readiness for decision-making. If in that first interaction you show evidence that you need individual counseling, then we'll schedule a traditional appointment with a traditional office as we would in any other standard counseling center. So this is the model how it works. As you walk into the career center, you see that nice kind of round desk. So the individual enters, and the staff member will say, "What brings you here today?" We don't like to say, "How may I help you?" because that puts the focus on the practitioner, not on the individual where it belongs. And so if they have a concrete request for information and there's no evidence they have a problem, then they're going to come right down to self-help services. And we'll explain to them how they can access the web or resources that are available. But if they don't have a concrete request for information and there's some evidence that they have a problem, then we're going to go on to more comprehensive screening, and that's where we'll use the career thoughts inventory to assist with that. It's possible that we may say, well, no, you have a pretty high degree of capability, not much complexity. We'll refer you on to self-help services. Not very likely. But as a result of this comprehensive screening, then we're going to probably get you into the brief staff assisted services. We may, on the basis of that, move you over to the individual case managed services by saying, given the complexity of the problem that you've presented today, let's schedule a time where you can sit down with a counselor to really focus on what your needs are. You notice that there's a lot of referring back and forth because people can start in one level of service and move to another level of service as they go along, because readiness is not a permanent characteristic. It can improve over time. People can become more ready to make decisions and move between levels of service deliveries. Or if a person is using self-help services, as we walk by and say, are you finding the information you need? Then we're able to identify when a person is struggling, and then we move them up in a level of service, some all the way to the individual counseling. We have lots of tools to help us in this process, the diagnostic assessments that Deb mentioned, the resource guides, what we originally called module sheets from the instructional design process, link resources to specific ideas, the individual learning plan for the brief staff assisted or individual case managed services is how we help a person sequence the resources they're going to use to make the choices they need to make. Those are delivered, the career assessments and information we have in our resource room, which we call our library, websites, and we also have information handouts available on the web to be able to deliver this. What we're truly trying to achieve with this is to avoid over-serving and under-serving people. We really want to focus staff resources on individuals that are most in need. Much like if you went to the emergency room at the hospital, they provide services first to the people that are most in need. So the saying that we have this is to provide the right resource used by the right individual with the right level of support at the lowest possible cost. And part of our issue here is to avoid contributing to social injustice by limiting the number of individuals that can be served with individual appointment-based interventions. One of the questions I've posed before is, are we responsible only for the people that come in through our door requesting service, or are we responsible for the people in our community that really need help? And I'd like to think it's the broader kind of responsibility. So you can't serve 19,000 people with individual scheduled appointments. We have to think more creatively, and the differentiated service delivery model is how we do that.
So critical to the integration of theory, research, and practice is training individuals to do this. And of course, with our PhD program in counseling psychology, our master's EDS program in career counseling, we do have formal classes where we train people on this. But one of the hallmarks of our center is this extensive training program that's done in the summer to train our career advisors who deliver a significant amount of the services, this brief staff assisted. So for 4 weeks in the summer, they're here learning this. They're learning a lot of things. They're going to be trained as professional counselors, but they're also going to learn, like day one, when they hit the desk in the Career Center at the end of August, they're going to be involved in integrating theory, research, and practice in those 20, 30 minutes when they're working on the desk. So over the years, we've evolved extensive training materials. The team that's working on that now have taken it to a whole new level for when I was involved in this. So there's an extensive manual that not only trains them on CIP theory, but other theories. It integrates mental health components. One of the hallmarks of our theories and the screening for readiness and what you heard earlier is that individuals, community individuals, students, bring their whole life issues. And of course, we say what brings you in today, so we focus on that, and the training teaches our career advisors to work on that, but we attend to all of the issues that they bring in. So as you've heard earlier, we've created handouts, exercises, guides, presentations to train our individuals on how to use this theory and how to hold it in working memory. As I said earlier, if you can't hold it in working memory, if you can't explain it and the concepts, it's very hard to use it in 20, 30 minutes on the desk as opposed to an individual counseling session. So they see this, they observe this, we have people modeling how to do this, they shadow people doing career advising who are using these resources. We give away our resources not only to people all over the world, but also to our own students that are in training here as well as staff, so they can get to, there are assigned readings that are on our website. So putting theory-based materials on the website, accessible, here's how you use this guide, here's how you use this handout. That's part of the hallmark of our training process. Also, in the 4 weeks that we do training or the training that we do with staff, training never really ends. You're always learning, you're always having new client situations. And so one of the things we do in weekly career advisor staff development meetings, all advisor meetings, is we look at situations that have come in and how does that inform. We continue to learn about CIP theory through our clients that come in, both through the drop-in model and also through individual counseling. So sharing those, here's what I did, here's how I used the CTI workbook in a new way, here's what I learned from a decision space worksheet activity, all of that is fodder for those career advisor meetings, as well as individual supervision. So all of the graduate students that are working on the desk are either getting hour or half-hour individual supervision, depending on the nature of the work in the center. And one of the things that allows us to be a training facility and to train our advisors to do this is we have support from our director, Myrna Hoover. If you look at our mission statement, it says we're a training facility, and that's why we're open to the public. That's why we have observation rooms, so we can provide support throughout the training process. So now I'm going to turn it over to Casey Dozier to talk a little bit about how the supervision enhances that.
Thank you, Dr. Lenz. So we talked about the fact that we have 18 graduate assistants who are career advisors, and they need that ongoing supervision. So one of the ways we provide that is through with a variety of individuals. People like myself who are full-time staff at the Career Center, generous professors who you've seen speak this morning who donate their time to provide those 30 to 60-minute individual supervision each week, as well as our graduate students. And I'll talk about in a moment how we train our graduate students to then supervise master's level students as well. And in addition to their individual supervision, they're also provided the weekly group supervision. So Dr. Lenz mentioned our weekly meeting. Right now it's Fridays at 8 a.m. So it's actually, we found a very productive time to bring bagels or have donuts and process those things that are happening. So if someone worked with a client who was homeless or who was transgender, just talking through how did that happen and how did that go for you. We also have several documents that we use. We work with faculty like Dr. Lenz, Dr. Osborn to ensure what we're doing is CASVE accredited and approved. And so one of those methods is to ensure that the individual sessions that happen are video recorded. So we currently use a program called Snapstream right now that allows both the supervisee and the supervisor to have full access to those videos, to make clips, so that they can really learn from that and be self-reflective in that process as well. We start out with a contract, and that's just an agreement between the supervisor and the supervisee, so everyone's on the same page about what will happen during supervision. And then the supervisees also create their own individual learning plan. That's an opportunity to discuss what they hope to do in that semester and that year, what they want to learn. And then finally, how do we pull in theory? So I can't tell you the number of times I've seen written on people's whiteboards, drawing out the pyramid, drawing out this CASVE cycle. One of our thoughts is if we can learn how to do it in CIP terms, then you can apply it in multiple avenues. You might integrate other theories as well. That's just a place to be able to process that, as well as bringing in documents. So whether that's bringing in a plan that you worked with a client or an assessment, the CTI that we talked about, to process and discuss that. So as I mentioned, we train our graduate students on how to become supervisors. So they actually go through, it's also a 4-week, but it's 4 individual meetings that we discuss supervisor training in terms of CIP theory, integrating other supervision theories, as well as just the administrative. How do I provide feedback now? I've been given feedback, but now how do I do it? We do have, again, as Dr. Lenz mentioned, materials that we're happy to share with that regarding the supervision manual. Now we're going to transition to discuss evidence related to career interventions. So I just want to point out a few quotes from Dr. Brown's latest APA handbook on career interventions. So he kindly noted some things about CIP and how it's being researched, as well as the applicability of CIP interventions in the counseling practice. So just wanted to make note of those, and I'm going to transition.
Me again. Janet and Jim gave the task, put this on the program, said, we need to look at evidence-based practice for CIP. Gary figured it out, and they had other things to do, so I looked around and said, who could help me with this? And one of our graduate students was walking down the hall, and I hooked him in, Adam Miller, and together we tackled the problem of evidence-based practice. And we conceptualize this together, in 3 ways. And by the way, you weren't going to get away from here without looking at numbers sometime. The first numbers you've seen at a psychology event. First, we want to look at evidence in terms of the types of media that we use to disseminate knowledge from. And there's a number down here, 277. We maintain a CIP bibliography, and all our graduates in the room and former graduates have pitched in to locating and archiving these 277 articles and books and whatever references. So that is our domain of information. And out of that, Adam and I looked at every citation and assigned that citation to different categories and through consensus. Unfortunately, we don't have inter-rater reliability coefficients or whatever, but you have to trust us that by consensus, these numbers are pretty good. We have faith in these numbers. But we see over time the kinds of works that we use to disseminate our knowledge: articles, books, handbooks, book chapters, dissertations, theses, technical reports. All those are located in our bibliography. And we look at these over 3 decades, primarily the 90s, 2000, and then the 2000 teens. There's a particular number that we are very, very proud of. That number 56. The number of dissertations and theses that have come out of our Career Center. I think that is fantastic. I think these allows students an opportunity to conduct research, to learn about CIP, to practice it, to think about it, conceptualize, and push the frontiers. So I think that is, if there's one number up there, I really like that number. The second is refereed article dissemination. Look at the peer-reviewed article as a unit of verifiable knowledge. And for this, we looked at it in terms of circles of domains. First, we have FSU, which is our lab. This is the Career Center, the Tech Center, and we have access to our 3340, that's our career development course. We have access to clients, but this is our lab. And we had a provost once who looked at faculty productivity across all disciplines, and he was a biologist. And his major question or way of looking at faculty performance was, how good is your lab? And so this is our lab over there. And you can see the production from our lab over time. The last section here, there's only 6 years in that. So it's going to be not the full 10 years of the others. But that originates from FSU students and faculty. Then we look at the growth of national authors. These are works that are produced outside of FSU across the US. And we look at the growth of that, so that we're looking at disseminating our research in the US. Also, we look at international. These are journals, and look at this, how international journals have picked those. And these are the English, most ones we can record and read in English. So there is a growth there. So we look at evidence in terms of dissemination. How far is our reach? And we can see our reach is going beyond FSU into the US and internationally. Finally, studies of evidence-based practice. These are empirically and quantifiable works. The first one is close to Betsy Becker's heart, who they will hope everyone attends the plenary session later this afternoon. Here we look at outcomes. These are where we have evidence of pre-post results, so we can look at beginning and end. What makes this challenging for us is in CIP, a CIP intervention can be anywhere from 20 minutes in brief staff assisted to an entire career course, which is a semester. So in undertaking a really good study, we have to somehow deal with the variation in the way CIP is implemented. Then we have process and application. These are case studies. Our student Julia has a recent publication of a case study that applies CIP. Then finally, we have validity of measures. We have the CTI, and it's amazing when you look at that number, 101, how a measure draws research. When we operationalize constructs in measurable ways, we have ways of disseminating and offering others a way of investigating impact. And so we have a large portion of our works are in validity and reliability of the measures that we have produced. And altogether, we're pretty proud of what we've done over the years. That spanning, hate to say the number of decades, but at least 3 that we have worked together